Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going to be taking a deep dive into a really pivotal period in history, one that I think has a lot of relevance to the stuff we're seeing play out on the world stage today, and that is the road from the Congress of Vienna to World War I. We've got a stack of lectures and excerpts here, all focused on this period where the balance of power in Europe first stabilized and then completely unraveled.
Yeah, what I think is fascinating about this era is that it starts with this really conscious effort to create a lasting peace. The Congress of Vienna, right, convened in 1815 after the Napoleonic Wars.
hmm
And it wasn't just about, redrawing boundaries. I mean, it was about establishing a system that would prevent future conflicts.
So, like getting the reset button on Europe after a period of pretty intense upheaval.
Exactly. I mean, trying to create order out of chaos, right?
Yeah,
The key players, Austria, Russia, Prussia, Great Britain.
the big ones.
They were determined to prevent the emergence of, another Napoleon.
Right, right.
And they aimed to achieve this through a system of collective security and diplomacy known as the Concert of Europe.
The concert of Europe. Okay.
Yeah, think of it as a carefully constructed seesaw designed to keep the weight of power, evenly distributed.
So like a seesaw where each nation had to kind of adjust their position to maintain that equilibrium.
Precisely.
I like that. That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
So did this concert of Europe, did it actually work? Did it actually keep the peace?
For a while, yeah, it did. The first few decades after the Congress of Vienna were relatively peaceful. There were no major wars between the great powers,
Okay.
and diplomacy was, the primary tool for resolving disputes.
So it sounds like they, at least for a time, achieved what they set out to do.
Yeah, but beneath this seemingly calm surface, there were some really powerful forces brewing, forces that would ultimately challenge that Vienna system and lead to its demise.
Okay, so what were these forces that started to kind of disrupt the balance? Was it simply a matter of, individual countries becoming more powerful and ambitious, or was there something else at play?
Yeah, it was more complex than that. Nationalism was a huge one. It's a potent force, for both unity and division, and it began to rise across Europe. People started identifying more strongly with their ethnic and cultural groups and demanding self-determination and challenging the existing empires.
So that rise of nationalism that put pressure on these existing multinational empires like the Austro-Hungarian Empire, like the Ottoman Empire.
Exactly, yeah.
I can see how that would create some serious internal instability.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, these empires, they were like patchwork quilts of different nationalities, and the rise of this nationalist sentiment really threatened to tear them apart from within. I mean, just look at the Ottoman Empire.
Yeah, yeah.
They faced, numerous revolts and independence movements throughout the 19th century.
And this wave of nationalism, it wasn't limited to just challenging empires, right? Didn't it also contribute to the unification of both Germany and Italy?
Absolutely. Both Germany and Italy emerged as unified nation states during this period, significantly altering the European map and the power dynamics. The unification of Germany in particular created a new economic and military powerhouse.
Right in the heart of Europe.
Right in the heart of Europe, shifting that balance of power that the Congress of Vienna had so carefully crafted.
Okay, so you've got this, this rising tide of nationalism reshaping the political landscape, disrupting that established order. Were there other factors at play that kind of further destabilized the situation?
Yeah, I mean, the Industrial Revolution was a huge game changer.
Of course.
Not just in terms of economic and social progress, but also in how it transformed warfare. Think about the impact of railroads, the telegraph, the development of, new weaponry.
It's amazing to think about how technologies that we now take for granted, completely revolutionized the way wars were fought. Were these advancements seen as a threat or an opportunity by the European powers? Or was it kind of a mix of both?
It was a bit of both. I mean, industrialization, it brought with it a sense of progress and optimism, but it also fueled anxieties and competition. The nations, they recognized the need to modernize their militaries to keep pace with these advancements, and that led to an arms race that further escalated tensions.
So industrialization essentially created this feedback loop where each nation felt compelled to keep up with its rivals, leading to this ever-escalating arms race.
Exactly.
Okay, so how did the existing powers, how did they react to this changing landscape?
Well, insecurity and mistrust were on the rise, and alliances, they started to form.
Okay,
And these alliances initially intended to deter aggression. Ultimately, they created a dangerous web of interconnected obligations.
so the very mechanisms that were intended to prevent war may have actually made it more likely.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah, the Triple Alliance, consisting of Germany, Austria, Hungary, and Italy, emerged as one bloc.
Okay.
And, facing this, France, Russia, and Great Britain formed the Triple Entente.
Right.
And these alliances created a situation where a conflict involving even just one member could potentially drag all the others into war.
Oh wow. So it's like setting a house of cards on a seesaw. This really delicate balance, prone to collapse with the slightest tremor. Let's take a closer look at how these alliances, coupled with the other forces that we've discussed, ultimately contributed to the outbreak of World War I.
It's kind of wild how, these alliances, they were supposed to keep things peaceful, but they actually, I think you could argue they made war more likely. They created this system where like any little conflict could trigger a chain reaction, pull everyone in.
Yeah, it really does seem counterintuitive. You would think, right? Like having these, powerful friends would make you feel more secure, less likely to jump into a war. But it sounds like in this case it had the opposite effect.
Yeah, exactly. It's classic security dilemma. One country tries to beef up their security, and it makes everyone else nervous. So they got to do the same thing, and then things just kind of spiral. And in the early 1900s, with these alliances, any little spark could basically blow the whole thing up.
Right. So it wasn't just the alliances themselves, but that context in which they existed, right? A world that was already kind of on edge because of, the things we were talking about earlier, nationalism, industrialization, economic competition.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, each of those factors really added to that atmosphere of fear and suspicion and rivalry. Nationalism, obviously led to a lot of territorial disputes and ethnic tensions. Industrialization led to that arms race, that scramble for resources and markets.
Yeah, you mentioned economic competition playing a role in this too. Were there any like specific economic factors that were particularly, making things tense between those European powers?
Oh yeah, absolutely. The really fast industrialization of Germany, that was a big one. It kind of challenged that existing economic order. Germany was getting stronger, wanted colonies, which put them in direct competition with, Great Britain, France, and that just made those old rivalries even worse.
Right, right. So you've got this really complex kind of web, right? Political factors, economic factors, ideological factors, and all of them are feeding into this really volatile situation. So, were there any attempts to kind of calm things down through diplomacy, or had things gotten to a point where war was just seen as inevitable?
Well, there were definitely some attempts at diplomacy, but a lot of times they just weren't effective. The those major powers, they were too focused on their own interests, their own goals, and they were too suspicious of each other to really make the compromises that were needed.
Yeah, and even when diplomacy did happen, it was usually within the limits of these alliance systems, which I mean, it seems like that might have actually made real dialogue and cooperation even harder, right?
Yeah, that's a really good point. The alliances, they were meant to deter aggression, right? But they also kind of limited flexibility, made it tougher for countries to back down from a crisis. They didn't want to look weak or really making their allies mad.
So it's almost like a game of chicken. Each
Hmm.
side hoping the other one blinks first, but with no real way to de-escalate the situation.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. And as those tensions kept rising, even something small could set it off. And that's exactly what happened in 1914 with the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand.
Right, right. That assassination, it's often seen as the immediate cause of World War I, but it's clear that it was really just the spark that lit the fuse. That powder keg had been building for decades.
Exactly, the assassination of, Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, by a Serbian nationalist. It basically gave Austria-Hungary the excuse they needed to go after Serbia, who they saw as a real threat to their stability.
And it was that ultimatum that Austria-Hungary gave Serbia, backed by Germany, that really kicked things off, right?
Exactly. It was a harsh ultimatum designed to be rejected so Austria-Hungary would have a reason to go to war. And when Serbia didn't meet all the demands, Austria-Hungary declared war, and they knew they had Germany's support.
And then everything just started falling apart. Russia, because their alliance with Serbia, they mobilized their troops, and that made Germany declare war on Russia. Then Germany declared war on France, Russia's ally. And when Germany invaded neutral Belgium to get to France, Great Britain jumped in to defend Belgium because their treaty obligations.
Yeah, and in just a few weeks, the whole European continent was at war, a war that would eventually cost millions of lives and completely reshape the world.
It's a really powerful reminder of how fast, a crisis in one region fueled by all these underlying tensions, and that rigid alliance system, how quickly it can just get out of control and lead to a global catastrophe.
Yeah, totally. The start of World War One shows just how fragile peace really is, and how dangerous things like unchecked nationalism, militarism, and just a lack of good diplomacy can be.
So as we kind of dig deeper into the specific events of the war, and what happened afterward, it's really important to keep this broader context in mind, right? The assassination of Franz Ferdinand might have been the trigger, but the real causes go way deeper.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, World War One wasn't some isolated event. It was the result of this whole complex set of factors that had been building for decades.
And as we think about this period, I think there's some really important lessons to learn, right? About the need for diplomacy that's flexible, the dangers of these rigid alliances, and just how important it is to deal with those underlying tensions before they escalate into conflict. It's kind of mind-blowing how one event, the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, could set off such a catastrophic chain of events. It really shows how interconnected everything is in international relations, especially when you've got all these tensions and those rigid alliances we were talking about.
Right, and it's important to remember that that assassination, it was the immediate trigger, but the underlying causes of World War One, they go much deeper. It was decades of shifting power, rising nationalism, militarism that was basically unchecked, and diplomacy that just failed to address all those tensions that were building up.
Yeah, and you've mentioned that failure of diplomacy a few times. Was there truly no way to avoid war through, diplomatic channels? Were there any attempts to sort of calm things down before it all went, off the rails?
Oh, there were definitely attempts at diplomacy, but they were often held back by a lack of trust, miscommunication, and just the constraints of those alliance systems, those major powers. They didn't want to make concessions. They thought that would make them look weak, and the alliances, they made it hard to negotiate, on their own without looking like they were betraying or abandoning their allies.
So the alliances, they were meant to make things more secure and stable, but they actually ended up creating a system that was so rigid and inflexible that it helped lead to the war. That's a sad irony.
Yeah, it really is. The alliance system, I mean, it probably started with good intentions, but in the end, it was a major factor in the crisis getting worse. It meant that a conflict between Austria-Hungary and Serbia, it could pull in all the great powers of Europe, turn a regional dispute into a global war.
So looking back on all this, what are some of the key things, that students of international relations should take away from this? What are the lessons that we can learn from the events that led to World War One?
Well, I think there are several really important lessons we can take from this period. First of all, the balance of power, it's a delicate thing, and it's always changing. Even something like the Congress of Vienna system, it was carefully designed, but it couldn't hold back those underlying tensions and the unexpected things that happened.
It's almost like trying to freeze the international system, right? Like in one specific configuration, it can actually cause instability because it doesn't let power shift naturally. It doesn't adapt to change.
Right, exactly. And another important lesson is about nationalism. Nationalism, it can be a powerful force for unity, for identity, but it can also be a source of division, of conflict, of territorial disputes, especially when you've got other things going on at the same time, like economic rivalry or political instability.
And we've seen that play out, over and over again throughout history, and even today, right? Nationalist feelings, they still shape the way politicians talk and the way they make decisions about foreign policy.
Oh, absolutely. And another thing to remember is that technology, it can have a big impact on international relations. Technological progress, it's a good thing. It can bring a lot of benefits, but it can also have consequences that we don't expect, especially when it comes to war. All those rapid technological changes in the late 1800s, early 1900s, they contributed to the arms race. They made everyone more anxious, and they made war much more destructive.
Yeah, it's a reminder that technology on its own, it doesn't guarantee peace or progress, right? It's about how we choose to use it, how we manage it, that really determines its impact on international relations.
For sure. And finally, I think, the events that led up to World War One, they really highlight how important diplomacy is, how important communication is, and being committed to resolving disputes peacefully. Diplomacy, it doesn't always work to prevent conflict, but it's still a crucial tool for managing relationships between countries, for building trust and for finding common ground.
Yeah, it's definitely clear from our deep dive today that the road to World War One was a really complex one, shaped by all these different factors coming together. The Congress of Vienna, it did manage to bring about a period of peace, but in the end, it couldn't contain those forces of nationalism, economic competition, and all that rapid technological change, and those forces, they ultimately led to global conflict.
Yeah, and as we deal with all the complex issues of the 21st century, understanding the lessons from this period in history, it can give us some really valuable insights into the challenges we face today, and the opportunities too. In a world that's more interconnected than ever and changing so quickly.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us for this deep dive into a really transformative period in international relations. We hope you learned something and that you have a better understanding of the events that led to World War One. And we hope that some of the lessons that we talked about that they could be applied to the study and the practice of international relations today. Thanks again.